The night was quiet, deceptively quiet. The city slept under a gray fog, streetlights casting tired circles of light on the empty pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled, a lonely echo through the concrete maze. It was the kind of night when fate likes to play its cruelest tricks. A woman in a dark coat walked slowly along the sidewalk, holding her bag close to her chest. She was heading home after a long shift, exhausted but calm. No one passing by could have guessed who she really was. Behind that soft, silent expression lived a soul forged in fire. A woman who had once commanded a special forces unit and led soldiers through hell. She had survived battlefields, lost comrades, and buried her pain deep enough to fool the world. Tonight, she was just another tired woman on her way home. Or so it seemed. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of the human heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us bring true, meaningful stories to life. Her name was Anna Sokolova, once a general in the elite special forces, now just a shadow of her former self. After her last operation, she left the army. Her body bore scars, but the deepest wounds were invisible. Guilt, loss, and memories that never fade. She avoided crowds, avoided talking about the past. Mornings, she helped elderly neighbors, walked dogs for a widow across the street, carried groceries for veterans who could barely stand. No one knew her story. The only clue was an old photograph hidden in her drawer, a younger Anna in uniform smiling beside her team. Every man in that photo was gone now. One cold evening as she walked home, she noticed 3 young men loitering outside a small store. Loud laughter, the clinking of bottles, cheap music from a phone speaker. Harmless maybe, but when one of them smashed a bottle at her feet, glass scattering like ice, she stopped. Calm, still. The boys laughed louder. One swaggered forward, grinning, thinking he was being brave. He had no idea who he was dealing with. When his hand landed on her shoulder, something inside her shifted. The world around her froze. The sound of laughter faded, replaced by echoes, explosions, gunfire, screams. A flashback she didn't ask for, triggered by a touch. Her breathing slowed. The instinct woke, sharp, silent, deadly. He grabbed for her bag. She moved, fluid, precise, no hesitation. A twist of her wrist and a cry of pain. In seconds, he was on the ground. The others lunged, but she was already 2 steps ahead. One kick to the ribs sent another gasping. The third reached for a knife, but froze when he saw her eyes. There was no anger in them, only warning. Cold, calm, absolute control. When it was over, Anna simply adjusted her coat, picked up her bag, and walked away. Her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the sorrow of having to fight again. Once these same hands had saved lives. Tonight they defended her own. By the next morning, the story had spread around the neighborhood. Did you hear? Some woman took down 3 guys without even hitting them in the face. People laughed, others admired. But for Anna, it was a storm she didn't want. She hated attention, hated reminders. She wanted peace. But peace never stays for those who have seen war. Soon she realized she was being watched. A shadow in the reflection of a window. Footsteps behind her at night. The instinct she thought she'd buried whispered, "They're coming back." The men she'd stopped belonged to a local gang. Now they wanted payback. They didn't know she was no ordinary woman. For them, she was an easy target. For her, this was a test, not of strength, but of restraint. That night, she sat in the dark by the window, holding an old medal in her trembling hands. The world outside was silent, but inside her head, chaos. The voices of her fallen soldiers. The weight of every command she'd ever given. She whispered softly, "I don't want to fight anymore." Then from the street below came the sound she feared. Heavy boots, crude laughter, breaking bottles. "Come out, lady. Let's talk." She didn't move. Then she stood slow and steady and opened a drawer. Inside lay an old military dog tag, cold and worn by years. Her thumb brushed the engraved number. "Forgive me," she whispered to her lost comrades. "Looks like it's time again." When the door burst open, the hallway filled with light. In a flash, silence. No screams, no chaos, just the efficient precision of training. 3 seconds later, 3 men were on the floor. One tried to rise, clutching his arm, and froze when she looked at him. That calm, commanding stare, the stare of someone who had seen war. "Leave," she said quietly. "While you still can." He did. After that night, Anna disappeared. Some said she moved to a small village. Others said she started working with orphans and wounded veterans. Those who found her later spoke of a quiet woman who built playgrounds with her own hands, who smiled with kindness but carried a depth of sorrow in her eyes. She no longer wore her medals. She didn't talk about war, but in everything she did bore out, in every act of compassion, lived the same strength that once led men into battle. Sometimes, in the evening, she would step outside and look at the sky, where helicopters once roared, where her past still lingered among the stars. She smiled softly, not because she forgot the pain, but because she had learned to live with it. When someone from the village asked her, "Anna Nikolaevna, how do you manage to do so much for everyone?" she simply answered, "You just have to remember who you are, even when the world tries to make you forget."